Hello, everyone, and welcome to Once Upon a Time at the Oscars.
The show that takes you through every Best Picture nominee from 1927 to today.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Ryan.
Read all about it. I
Again?
did that before. Yeah, I did that for Front Page.
Which I think is fitting because this movie owes itself a little bit to Front Page and everything that came before.
This is true. This is true.
So hi, we're back.
We're back. It's the 5th Academy year. Oh, wait, we've already done that too. What am I doing?
Just a little Easter egg for everyone there, a little peek behind the curtain. We're recording this on the same day as we record our 4th Academy Award ceremony. So,
Yeah.
we're a little jumbled as to what year we're covering, what year it is.
Yeah, got a little confused.
But we're talking about Five Star Final, which was released in 1931 and is part of the 5th year of the Academy Awards.
That's exactly what I meant to say 45 seconds ago. So
Extra.
Yeah, exactly.
Hear all about that.
So this is another movie I don't think either one of us had seen prior to
It is another
covering it
movie.
for the show. Yes, nailed it. Man, we're doing great. And
I've never heard of this before either.
had you not?
No, Front Page, I mentioned there's some familiarity with the name and everything, but Five Star Final, going into this, I had absolutely zero idea what that name could be referring to.
Right.
I thought maybe it might be some kind of 5-star general or like a war type thing.
Sure.
So walking in completely blind to this.
You know, as dumb as this sounds, every time I heard this title, I thought of throwing stars, and I was like,
Because of the 5 points? Or
yeah, like ninja stars.
Oh, so
I thought maybe this is a ninja movie?
were you thinking 5-star finality? 5-star finish him?
I think it's just the star. The star alone,
okay.
I was like, yeah. You know?
It would be really funny if it was a 30-second movie and it was a guy just talking and all of a sudden just
Yeah. Yeah.
final moments of a 5-star life.
I'd watch it.
Yeah, sure, me too.
Did you read why this is called 5-Star Final?
I did.
Okay.
And I'd love to provide some context. So we're following the news publications once again, specifically one publication to be specific, and that's the Evening Gazette. So the Evening Gazette is what we follow here, and the 5-star final refers to the final printing of the day. So when you have a 5-star final, that means there are no other updates that will be released in that day. This is the final version of today's paper.
Which is really interesting to me. It reveals how little I knew about newspaper publications.
Same.
I did not know that it was well, I guess I've heard the morning edition is coming out, but that will be the least up-to-date version of that paper for that day. Whereas by the time you pick it up in the afternoon or the evening, you receive the 5-star final that has everything with the most up-to-date news. And yeah, I had no idea that's how that worked. So
neither did I. So I was wondering what this was referring to. It's really not until towards the end of the movie, maybe the last 30, 25 minutes, that they actually mention 5-star final.
Right.
Of, hey, we're not going to be providing any more updates here. This really is the 5-star final. Get these out and put these images on there. So before we run down the synopsis here or the cast, want to mention this is another example where we only have one nomination for this film, and unsurprisingly, for the reason we're talking about it, that would be Best Picture on behalf of First National. But this is a film that was directed by Mervyn LeRoy. One thing I thought was kind of interesting about him is that he has directed 8 Best Picture nominees.
Yes. Huge name.
Huge name, and this is the first that we've seen of Mervyn LeRoy, correct?
Correct, yeah. I mean, he was kind of one of 2 giant names at Warner Brothers through the 30s, so we're going to see so much of him. He directed Little Caesar from the previous year, which wasn't nominated for Best Picture, but it was nominated at the Academy Awards, I believe, for writing.
Another connection it had to 5-star final.
Oh, yes, yeah, right. He also did I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, which we'll be covering next year. Gold Diggers of 1933. He left Warner Brothers in 1939 and swapped over to MGM, where he produced, this is probably his most famous thing, he produced The Wizard of Oz.
Of course.
And then we'll be covering him in the 50s as well with Quo Vadis in 1950.
Quo Vadis?
Yes. It's like this big biblical epic.
Can't wait.
Yeah. I've watched it before. It's pretty solid.
Sounds hot.
It has the voice in Disney's The Robin Hood that does the prince.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I could do his voice. It's so funny. That was my terrible terrible impression.
No, it's like he was in the room. No, the connection that I mentioned to Little Caesar was, I mean, obviously Mervyn LeRoy, but Edward G. Robinson
Yes.
starred in it.
Yeah. Run us down the cast while you're at it, since we're talking Edward.
Me? Okay, sure. So for the cast, I have Edward G. Robinson as Joe Randall, Marion Marsh as Jenny Townsend, H.B. Warner as Michael Townsend, Anthony Bushell as Philip Weeks, George E. Stone as Ziggy Feinstein.
Yeah.
Our guy, George E. Stone. I knew that was coming. Frances Starr as Nancy Townsend, or Nancy Voorhees. Ona Munson as Kitty Carmody, Boris Karloff as T. Vernon Isopod. We will be back. We will be back to talk about Boris Karloff in this movie.
Yes.
Aline McMahon as Miss Taylor, and Oscar Apfel as Bernard Hinchcliffe.
Pretty big cast.
There's about 2 or 3 other names that I didn't include here just because they were a little lower on the list of it, importance or screen time.
Yeah.
But they were in the intro. We talked about, similarities to front page in this, and the similarities start not just from the synopsis, but also from the intro to this, because the intro also has what you talked about in our front page episode with the spinning newspaper, and then the intro for each person individually. And we see 3 names at the end that I didn't include here because I think they had one scene together.
Yeah, they're kind of smaller parts.
Right, but otherwise I listed the bigger players. So, synopsis. You want to run us through 5-star final?
Yeah, essentially, I always, me personally, I try to avoid a synopsis and just give the real quick beat.
The vibe.
Yeah, the vibe. And it really is Edward G. Robinson, again, plays Joseph Randall. He works at a newspaper that is full on yellow journalism. They are the sensationalism news, headlines going crazy, twisting the truth just to sell papers. And he's not a fan of that. He's doing everything in his power to be a more legitimate publishing newspaper company. And they are looking to print this 20-year-old story about a woman who murdered her husband. The paper company then sends Boris Karloff, Mr. Isopod, to pose as a clergyman. What
Clergyman.
Clergyman,
Yeah.
to wed the daughter, husband-to-be, of...
Bridegroom.
Yes, the bridegroom. Thank you. What a great word. Goes to pose as the clergyman to wed the bridegroom of the woman who is the highlight of this story. And it's kind of just an example of, look at how damaging yellow journalism can be to the individual and the people that it slanders or libels.
Yeah, this was interesting to me because did some research on what this actually was stemmed from, what this was based on. So this is actually, the Evening Gazette is based on a real life publication called the New York Evening Graphic. This actually has earned the name, and this is true. Critics called it the porno graphic because it was so salacious, to your point.
Right.
That it was looking for the dirtiest side of the story to tell, and it did not concern itself much with the morality of the story.
Yeah.
And who they were affecting. So they made this movie based on that idea. Even earlier on, I think it may have been misconstrued as satire on my part, but you have some employees of the Evening Gazette that go to certain newsstands and say, hey, I thought we told you to put those Evening Gazettes up top. What are they doing at the bottom? And they're not swayed by bullies, so they start splattering ink all over the newsstand and get out of there before the cops get there. So it really does lend itself to proving that, or at least labeling that this publication are bullies.
Right.
And they are just here to kind of raise chaos rather than report the truth.
Right. And not just chaos for the sake of chaos. They're doing everything in their power to sell papers. And the most fascinating thing that I did in my research was I read up more on William Randolph Hearst. Did you dive into any of that at all?
I don't think I did.
Okay. So William Randolph Hearst is a super interesting individual. He was the head of one of, I think, the biggest newspaper publishing company in the turn of the century. And he had kind of a publication war with Joseph Pulitzer, who was the rival newspaper publishing company. And he resorted to yellow journalism. He did a lot of this sensational headlines, adding things like photos of scantily clad women just to sell more papers. And he ended up being the inspiration for Charles Foster Kane in the 1940 film Citizen Kane. He actually, when he saw this movie, he assumed that it was an attack on his character. So he, in his papers, which were heavily influenced by his own personal opinions, he added reviews of the film that were like, this is garbage, don't see it, don't support it. And he's just a huge name during just like American culture at the time. There was a rumor for a while that his style of journalism and his own personal opinions being published into his paper led to the Spanish-American Civil War. Or not the Civil War. What is it? Spanish-American War. So, like, massive influence this guy had.
Yeah, I mean, what? Like, that's just not... I didn't expect the words, like, Civil War or American War to come out of your mouth on that. With his influence. I gotta tell you, too, if you watch an absolutely heinous character, or at least a heinous, like, publication, and your first thought is like, is this play about me? I think it's time to do a little soul searching, my man.
Exactly. But yeah, I just think it's wild. I looked at his like in popular culture tab, and there are so many movies and stories and books that revolve around his character and his influence on American culture and American politics. He went on to be, I believe, a congressman. So he had massive influence on the American public. And there are so many films, this Citizen Kane, just to name two, that really showcase the type of man he was. And with the front page, we talked about, you know, maybe this is showcasing the corrupt nature of the newspaper industry. And I think that's what we'll start to see more anytime that is a setting in some of these films.
Yeah, I think that there's a clear exception to the rule of how this does kind of lend itself to the front page. And I do think, much like how we talked about the trends that we see at the Oscars, it is kind of fitting that we see something like the front page come out and then 5-Star Final have so many similarities to it. Not just in its synopsis or, you know, subject matter, but also that intro and a lot of the, you know, satire that comes with this. But the difference here is the Joe Randall character. Edward G. Robinson's portrayal as Joe Randall really does kind of serve as the audience in terms of when your morality kicks in. Is this okay? Should we be doing this? Even while we're doing it, do we have a little bit of a smirk of like, oh, great, look at how we get to do this. Mm-hmm. There's a line early on that I loved, and this was a movie that I was so thrilled continued my trend of looking for the screenplay moments in this where they really get to shine. Yeah. There's a line early on that Joe Randall says that I loved, and he says, put a $5 raise through for Ziggy. He thought of a new way to kill 100 people. Yes. I loved this line, and I love the delivery of that from Joe Randall. Well, Edward G. Robinson, because Joe Randall is that, like, he is the pessimist. He is the guy in the role who is doing this and knows what he's doing, but he's aware of his own failure, and he's aware of how he doesn't want to be doing this anymore and how wrong it is to be doing this. So I really, really liked Edward G. Robinson in this movie. I thought he was fantastic. Also, one of the squarest heads I've ever seen. Yeah. That man does have a square jaw.
He does.
He's very good in this. And I did like the breakdown. While I was doing the cast here, I was looking through like Jenny Townsend, Michael Townsend, Philip Weeks, Nancy Townsend. And for the first 20 minutes or so of this movie, I was writing that down. I was like, who is this? Like, who are these people? Because that's not who we're being introduced to right now. Right. And then we get introduced to the Townsends and Philip Weeks. And this is where I think things started to take a turn for me, where I thought this was a little bit of a satire of the, not even a satire, but more of a comedy through the publication business and what that looks like. And again, one of the glories of walking into movies blind is also the downside of like, you're like, oh, this is a great comedy. And you're like, there's an hour of melodrama in this that's going to tear you apart. Yeah. Cool. Great. Can't wait. The reasons I thought this was a comedy, that intro lent itself a little bit to the front page of, yes, it's a satire, but there's a lot of humor in this too. Also, one of the operators who works for the afternoon or the Evening Gazette, I know you know what I'm talking about. She has this great delivery where there's 3 of them, but we only see one continuously because she has a great way of saying it. And she always says like, Evening Gazette, good afternoon.
Yeah, she's got that. She for you Twin Peaks fans out there, she sounds like Lucy the receptionist at the Twin Peaks Police Department. Jeez.
Do you see do you believe that there's an actual like resemblance? Not resemblance, but like intentionality. Like he intentionally pulled from something like this.
Well, I think, man, if it was David Lynch, I could see him going back that far for that inspiration.
Right.
I think that stereotype is kind of just a running thing because you also have like Ghostbusters.
Oh, sure.
Very
Andy Potts.
similar. Yeah.
Andy Potts, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I just said that really fast. I was like, am I confident about that?
Mrs. Potts?
I'm pretty sure it was her. Chip Taylor's old ass time. He's drinking. Sorry, I tried to do it. So I was close.
Almost got me.
Almost got him. So, put a $5 raise through for Ziggy. He thought of a new way to kill 100 people. The Evening Gazette, good afternoon.
Yeah.
A lot of this kind of like helps bring up like, oh, cool. There's some there's some levity to this. And I'm really enjoying this so far.
Zippy dialogue and all of that.
The zippy dialogue. That's a great way to put it. And then we're introduced to the Townsends. And the Townsends kind of are the centrality of this story. The story here is that there is a woman who is part of a murder where she has murdered someone previously and she has moved on with her life. This was 20 years ago.
Yes.
And it has come out that she actually might be living locally in the area.
Yeah.
And under a different name. And that's where we're introduced to Nancy Townsend. We get a moment with her and her husband, Michael, and they get the chance to kind of tell each other, well, I wish our daughter knew everything about our lives, how you're actually not her father, and her father was the man that I murdered, and now I'm living a different life. The way that I liked how this was played out, or the reason I liked how this was played out, is that they really didn't have it be like, yes, I got away with murder, and now I'm living a double life. It's like, I want to get away from all that, and I'm just happy to be living this life now with you.
Yeah.
And it really is like, we are happy where we are, and this is the end of our story. Our daughter is getting married. This should be a joyous time for us. But instead, now there's all this, well, hey, now it's kind of getting out that I might be someone who they don't think I am. And do we want our daughter to know that? Is that going to like completely destroy her reputation because she's about to marry a man who has a little bit of notoriety in him too? His father's a huge name in the machinery business.
Right.
So this is kind of the central part of the story, is that the Evening Gazette is trying to get its hands on as much information about her as possible, but she's trying to keep this on the down low. And that's where we start getting introduced to the people who are like the boots on the ground. Specifically, we're introduced to Kitty Carmody, Ona Munson, and she comes in and wants this street reporter role. And she gets it pretty quickly, but she has to work opposite, and this is where we get to riff a little bit, Boris Karloff as T. Vernon Isopod. We got to talk about Isopod. Boris Karloff in this movie, as soon as he enters in, was like an injection of adrenaline into my body, because everyone in this movie is just doing their like, listen, dame, come here, girl, listen up.
Yeah.
And then Boris Karloff walks in like, good evening.
He is very classic. Spooky Boris Karloff.
He is incredible in this movie because he is Boris Karloff. Like, it's not like, that character that Boris Karloff is playing. It's him.
Yeah, he just shows up and he's like, hello.
Even like he leans into the lisp. He leans into the voice. Like he does it. And he's so good because he is this absolutely miserable man where everyone who's like around him is like, this guy wouldn't take his hand off my knee. And he's like, don't ride a taxi cab with this guy. Next scene, she's like, so I rode a taxi cab with that guy. And he was like, I told you not to do that because this guy's a creep.
Yeah.
And he's playing creep perfectly. He's so good in this.
Yeah. He's the creep. He's kind of a pathetic guy, a very meek individual.
Yeah, he's not very convincing. Well, that's the thing. He's convincing to like the Townsends, and we'll get there.
Right.
He's convincing to them, but when he's trying to explain himself to like Randall or anyone else, Hinchcliffe, you immediately are like, that's the best you can come up with? Like, you're just on the fly, like, I'll find my way out of it.
Yeah, no, he's very much like a henchman of the paper.
Correct.
Bending to their will. He does exactly what he's supposed to, exactly what he's told to do. So he really doesn't exert any sense of power in this role. He's kind of mousy, but he's also that level of creep. So he's a fun character. And just seeing Boris Karloff on screen is always exciting. We saw him previously in... was it The Big House?
Was it?
Yeah, he plays one of the prisoners. Am I right? Or am I thinking of a different movie?
I think you might be thinking of a different movie.
It's another prison movie.
I would
Smart
like to
Money,
think
maybe?
that if I saw Boris Karloff and his like tall stature in a prison, I would be like, is that Boris Karloff?
I'm thinking of a different movie that I watched for one of these death races.
I guess there's a chance he was there, and this kind of lends itself to my point of what I was talking about, or what I want to talk about with the 5-star final, is that you have everyone in this movie that looks like they belong, and Boris Karloff does not look like he belongs.
Right.
When he walks in, it almost reminds me of the scene from It Follows. With that like the tall guy like bending down to get through the door.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, what? Who is this man? Like, run, everyone, get out of there. So it's very funny the role he ends up playing, in the sense that he is sent to the Townsends as a clergyman. This, to me, I thought was kind of the genius of the movie, where he's kind of tagged in as a clergyman, very accidentally. And they know, well, hey, they need a clergyman. Find out why they need a clergyman. Why is this happening? Is there a death in the family? What's going on?
Yeah.
So he ends up going and speaking with Michael and Nancy and finding out in real time that their daughter is getting married. And they're pretty much giving them all the information they need. Like, hey, here's a picture of my daughter, and here's what you can publicize with this. And make sure you don't put in any kind of publications, because we wouldn't want that to happen.
Right.
But also, I am Nancy Voorhees, and I did murder my husband. So there's that too. But, you're a clergyman. You're not going to tell anyone. And what I love so much about Boris Karloff's character is, again, he's convincing to them because they're unassuming. But when you watch him try to be like convincing, the worst thing of all time.
Like when he shows shock when she reveals that she's Nancy Voorhees.
Literally, as she says "v" of Voorhees, he's like, oh, madam.
Yeah, he like jumps out of his seat, clutches his pearls.
Yes.
It's very over the top.
But it was that, and also it was when they were like, our daughter. And he was like, your daughter? Ah, yes, your daughter. It's like,
right,
buddy.
Because he has no idea what he's there for.
Correct.
So he's learning things as he goes. And that ultimately is the reason that the Townsends figure it out for themselves that, wait a minute, he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know who our daughter was. He didn't know we had a daughter.
He didn't know that our daughter's name, Jenny, wasn't short for Jeanette. It just was Jenny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when they are like, wait a minute. I think we've been had. He clearly isn't a clergyman. He clearly came here for information to print this story about who I used to be. And this is definitely when the movie shifts gears.
Yes.
And it becomes very serious.
Deathly serious, honestly.
Yes. Nancy spends the rest of her time on screen trying to reach out to the publication company to beg and plea that they do not print this story, because it will ruin her life and her daughter's life. And of course, this does get printed. There are some issues where the groom-to-be, his family, sees this and they learn the truth about Miss Townsend. And they come right over and they're like, listen, they can't be married. This is insane. Our son will not marry the daughter of a murderer. We're not doing this. And I think that Nancy and, is it Michael?
Yes.
Yes, both of them have such an incredible performance at this point, because Nancy is basically in hysterics from this point on, and Michael is doing everything he can to comfort her.
He's such a good anchor.
He really is. He's fantastic. And this leads to some really interesting camera work and unique editing. God. Because we have a scene where Nancy is calling the publication company, and I think this is the first time we've seen it in a movie we've covered.
Yes.
We get split screen on the screen where she is center frame, and once she reaches out and she talks to the operator, there's a split screen moment and you see the operator on that side of the screen, and then she connects them to the paper and you see
Hinchcliffe.
Hinchcliffe talking, and who's on the phone? Tell them, find out what they want. And there's this back and forth, and there's a lot of like dissolves when someone hangs up the phone and someone else picks it up.
Yep.
And it's really unique and really engaging, especially for this story.
Definitely. And of the time. I mean, the other aspect of this too is it wasn't just the formatting of that, but also when she first calls, we have almost what looks like a fade out of her scene, Nancy's scene, and a fade in to the operator. But in reality, the operator is answering, and as she answers and speaks, she's predominantly on screen, but you can still see kind of like a remnant of Nancy in the foreground or background of the shot. And then as Nancy starts speaking, it actually switches and it goes back to now Nancy is the forefront and the operators in the background.
Yeah.
And I thought that was incredible because I had not seen like, whoa, like we're not just, splitting the screen like you're talking about. We're actually kind of like shifting the focus based on who's speaking in this moment.
Yeah.
But the shots are overlapping each other. And I thought this was like almost like, I'm trying to think of a good example for this. When you're watching an interview sometimes on TV, you'll see like, you know, the picture of someone and it'll say like on the phone with blank, and they'll kind of be up there while they're speaking. It almost looked like something like that.
Yeah.
Where they're kind of like present on screen, but like in the background while they're not speaking. I thought that was an incredibly interesting shot. And then it lends itself to what you're talking about with this like three-way cut of what inevitably ends up being Joe, Randall, Nancy, and Hinchcliffe.
Right. Yes. And I want to take a moment to pause and speak on how important not only this formatting on screen of the split screen, the three-way split screen, but just the camera work in this is. This was adapted from a play written by Louis Wensenkorn, and it was adapted by Robert Lord and Byron Morgan. So we're seeing another play adapted for the screen. And there are times in the past where we've talked about plays adapted for screen where it feels very much just like that.
Yep.
A stage play where they point the camera.
Put the camera in one place and leave it there.
Yes. That doesn't happen in this. I think that the acting at times feels more like a stage play than...
Especially from Nancy.
Yes, then maybe it intends to, but the camera work is doing its best to say, no, you are watching a movie. There are so many camera setups in every single scene. For moments where they might get like a straight-on shot of you sitting on the chair, and then they're like, you know, that was good, but what if we move it over 3 feet to the right? It's still a head-on shot of you, but now we're getting it from a different angle. And there's really not a point to doing that other than saying, this is no stage play.
Or coverage.
Right, but usually when you get coverage, it's like, okay, we're going to get the over-the-shoulder of me looking at you, and then we'll get the turnaround.
Yes.
This, they really are just saying, we're going to get 5 seconds looking this way, and then we're going to get 6 seconds looking that way, all around different points of the room, for no reason other than to say,
we can.
Yeah, this is the movies, doll. You know, like we're doing crazy stuff with the camera. But also you have cool stuff like when the switchboard operator at the beginning, you're getting a camera angle like from the perspective of the switchboard.
Yeah.
So you're looking head on at them, and they're plugging in the wires and cables to transfer calls. Totally unique and interesting, and certainly not something you could do on a stage play. So I thought that was really cool and a really exciting choice by Mervyn Leroy to really pull this off of the stage and put it onto the screen.
Yeah, there's a lot of intentionality in this, and I really enjoyed the different angles in which they captured things.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I wanted to stop and mention here is that we need to talk a little bit about Edward G. Robinson. So we talked about how good he is in this movie. He has actually stated that this is his favorite movie of his.
Oh, really?
5-star final is. And I think it's because he's played, I mean, you can attest to this with Little Caesar, he's played so many gangsters.
Yeah.
That this was the only time that he got to play a gangster who was kind of on his way out. And he was like really trying not to be in a gangster film.
Right.
Right. But he is like essentially the Joe Randall character is a gangster. Like everyone in the publication, it fits that gangster role.
Yeah.
Even Boris Karloff as Isopod is like you mentioned, the henchman.
Sure.
So he really enjoyed the idea of like a gangster who really wanted better for his life.
Right. He's the gangster trying to get out of the life.
Correct.
And trying to also clean up the streets that he once reigned over.
Correct. So this is really interesting because he has such a career of movies like Little Caesar and the other films he's done where he was a gangster.
Smart money.
Yeah, smart money. That you take this role and you see this as a gangster film. And he's right. It is, in a way. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really interesting thing from his perspective. And this was a movie that already like has a lot of controversy behind it because even before its release, this was attacked by the censors. Like they deemed this as exceedingly dangerous. They said 5-star final was going to create problems for publications further down the road. So because of this, they had to actually bring down a lot of the questionable subject matter in it.
But I think that's the thing. While you do have the production code during this time period, you don't have it being strictly enforced the way it would in 1934 when the Hays Code is like, you cannot have these things in your film. And the sexual nature of like those jokes coming from Miss Taylor or the clergyman status of Boris Karloff's character, and then how dark things get later on. Like All of this is possible because this production code is not being enforced as well as it needs to. Another big bit of pre-code surprise is when they first bring up the story of Nancy Voorhees, which was her name before she committed the murder.
Right.
They mention something about a kid that she may have had, and even all of this is like very taboo. You know, was she married? Was it her husband? Did they get married because, you know, they had this kid beforehand and they had to get married? There's so much here that is just jaw-dropping to me. Is that the way you get when you watch pre-code?
Oh, for sure.
You're just shocked.
Well, and to be honest, I think I'm like less shocked whenever I do see things like Isopod and the whole clergyman thing. I understand that it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to pretend to be a clergyman. And you're like, like, I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. For sure. And then there's like, you know, them saying that he might be kind of a creep and then have his hand on her knee. Like, okay, sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. All the sexual things.
Really correct. And I will admit that the line where she mentions how I think Miss Taylor says, I'm really trying hard to say Miss Kitty. Like in between Kitty and Miss Taylor, I'm trying my hardest not to do that and sing a Toby Keith song. But so there is, that was for Taylor and only Taylor. So there's a line that you're talking about where I think specifically, if I remember correctly, Miss Taylor says, you know, I'm more modest in my breast size, whereas Kitty, and she just kind of suggests and like holds her hands out.
She does the whole like
the curvature.
She showcases the
correct.
The curvature.
So, and I thought this was interesting because while I was watching the movie, I think I looked away for a moment and I heard her say it, and I was like, oh, they skipped a line. And I went back and no, they didn't. She just doesn't finish it. She kind of just, you know, finishes it physically with her hands.
Yeah.
And that joke, I was kind of like, oh, that took me by surprise.
Right.
It was more pleasant, like, oh, cool, you got away with that. That's really cool. I will admit that the Michael and Nancy Townsend sequence in this, and we'll get to this here.
Yeah.
This shocked me. This I thought was completely unexpected. It was a tonal shift, 100%, because you're right. Once Nancy and Michael piece together that Isopod is not who he said he was, her performance becomes a lot more of a begging for her life.
Yeah.
Like, please, God, don't do this. Like, I'm begging you, please don't do this because it's going to ruin everything for me and everything I've worked for. And you have these men in Joe and in Hinchcliffe. Hinchcliffe, who comes across more as like, this is just like, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that ever. And you have Joe being like, it's done. Like it's out there. Like there's nothing I can do.
Right.
And you can sense a little bit of the like finality from him of like, sorry, this is who I am. And like, we're done. But you also have that aspect of him being like, look, even if I wanted to, it's out there. Like I can't pull it now.
Right.
It's out there. But then you have like Nancy just being so defeated that she is under the impression that even the day of her daughter's wedding, day before.
Yeah. It's like the day before.
I think it's the day of.
You come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding.
I think it's the day of because her husband discovers, like, it's not like he didn't sleep at the house. So I think it's the morning of.
Okay.
Because remember, he's out and she went and got the morning edition of the paper that not everyone has just yet. And that's when she starts making these pleas. And so it's the day of her daughter's wedding that she ends up deciding to take her own life.
Yes.
And I thought that was a shocking sequence. You didn't see anything, but it's very much like we talked about sentimental value earlier in the year. The sequence where they kind of simulate a door closing and then the insinuation of what happens behind it.
Sure.
That's on display here. And that's already disturbing enough to see something like that, especially in 1931, to where everything else that we talked about, you know, the pretending to be a clergyman, the allegations of being a creep towards women, the like drinking, or even some of the not suggestive, but some of the horrible things that I think it's Ziggy says.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He's on the phone with no one and he's just kind of like saying some things. It's almost kind of like they went through a dictionary of like, here's some things you aren't okay to say. And he's like, got it.
Yeah.
He just like starts going through it.
Georgie Stone is pretty despicable in this movie. Yeah.
And it's almost like in a goofy way, because the despicable nature really does come into full display with like more of a Hinchcliffe later on.
Right.
Or Isopod in, you know, the things that he suggests. But if this wasn't enough and Nancy's scene wasn't enough for you, the real heartbreak for me is Michael, her husband, when he comes home and finds her and he's just absolutely shocked by this. But his daughter is about to come in with her fiance. And instead of informing her of this happening, He pretends that everything's okay, and he sends her and her fiance on their way, tells them not to read like the newspaper or anything. And the line that absolutely destroys me is when he said, like, you know, she's like, you're going to come to the wedding, right? And he's like, well, I'm going to join your mom. He says, I'll join your mother. And we as the audience know what this means. But the double entendre there is that she expects him at the wedding. And I thought that was just brutal. And it absolutely destroyed me. Him answering the phone and then putting it off the hook, I thought that was devastating. And then he just walks into the bedroom. On top of that, that being heartbreaking enough as it is, we then see Kitty, and I'm going to forget who it was, but she brings someone to kind of film. She wants pictures of Nancy.
Right.
To prove, hey, this is who she is.
Right. And she's just doing the gross, like sneaking through the window and whatever it takes to get the photos.
Which is already gross on its own, even if like the things we'd seen happen haven't happened. But then they discover this. And while she's like, we need to call 911, she's like, but go ahead and set up the the tripod.
Yeah.
To get pictures.
Take those pictures. And,
yes.
and the photographer is like shocked and disturbed and terrified, and she's like, get over it, dude. Snap the photos. This is our big break.
And I thought that was devastating alone like that. Just the whole sequence was terrible. But again, it kind of captures the morality or the lack thereof, really, that was on display for things like this. So that is really what kind of not set me off, but really did make me question, like, wow, this really did have to lend itself to what's to come. You know, we talk about how things like Bad Girl, the suggestive, like sexual nature of things, but also just when it comes to the religion side of like clergymen, like how that was an issue for them, clearly, where they had to take that down. Like, were the suicides? That's another question now. It's like, were the suicides something that they mentioned of like, hey, we have to dial this down because that's a little too like suggestive? Because if they did, I'd like to know what was there previously, because this is pretty on display.
Yeah, it absolutely is. As you said, you don't see anything, but you hear things, and I was shocked by
Gasping.
that alone.
Yeah.
And it, you know, I think that I have nothing to back this up, but I imagine that when a story is adapted from a stage play, you kind of get a little bit of a pass, because it's like, look, this is the story as it has already existed,
Sure.
and this is... Clearly, it's been a popular stage play. If we're going to tell this story, we've got to tell it the way that people enjoy it and know it. That's probably what happened here. So maybe they were able to get away with certain things a little easier than if it were an original story. Kind of similar to Bad Girl, you know? They did some things there that normally would be too taboo for the screen, but it's like, you know, this is what the book is, so we got to do something.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that people would think if it's pre-code, then it's probably a lawless land. And that's not true. Like, there are still some, like, you know, obviously I mentioned how Hayes is still president at this time.
Right.
So while the Hayes Code or the code isn't put into put into place just yet, he still does have his finger on the pulse a bit of like, hey, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, like you shouldn't do this, pull this. And that's really not the lawless land that you would think of. Really isn't the reality of the movies at this time. These movies are still censored to a degree, but they aren't held to like one set standard across the board. It's just more case by case basis, right?
Right.
So it's interesting to see the movies that kind of slide by and they're like, yeah, you know, we weren't able to portray the idea of a woman who could stay out until 4 a.m. with her friend or her boyfriend, so they have to get married. But we can talk about suicide pretty openly in these movies. And I thought that was an interesting, you know, where's the balance on that? And the truth is that there isn't a balance. And unfortunately, there is a balance to come. And we will talk about that here. We actually have a really exciting guests for this year that I'm really excited to get to.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about this to kind of help us talk through this exact nature. But the code is something that isn't happening at this time. And this is, I guess this is my tagline of the show so far. We can kind of see itself lending to what kind of pushed the MPPDA to like making this happen and putting a code in place.
Right. The very strict Hayes Code.
Oh, you can't do that.
It's going to be wild when we get there. We'll see if the movies start to fall apart a little bit for us.
Yeah.
But getting back to the movie and the story itself, after this double suicide, I mean, that's kind of the climax of the movie. After this, you get a very remorseful Joseph Randall, who, this is it. After this happens, he's like, what are we doing here? This is a tragedy. Ultimately, Jenny shows up at the publication headquarters, and she is screaming at Randall and, what is it, Hinchcliffe?
It is Randall, Hinchcliffe, and Isopod are in the room.
Right. And she's just going off. She's like, why did you kill my mother?
All three of them. Yeah, right down the line in
Yes.
a row asks them that.
Explain that to me. Tell me why you killed her. And of course, this is the pinnacle of this movie, where Hinchcliffe is like, listen, you need to calm down. I didn't do this. Like, we are just printing stories. She's having none of it. She's like, no, why did you kill my mother? And it's such a great performance in this moment by Marion Marsh, and really a heartbreaking scene. And eventually Randall steps up and he's like, listen, we all did it. We're all responsible. I'm guilty. Hinchcliffe is guilty. Isopod is guilty, the big lug. And
he is sweating bullets in this scene, by the way.
Yeah, he is. And it's a heartbreaking scene. And just as she's about to commit an atrocity she would probably never live with herself if she had gone through with it, she pulls a gun, and her husband-to-be comes in and stops her, and he gets a little bit of a monologue and a great last moment where he's like, look, you guys are safe now, but if you ever print my wife's name in your paper, I'll kill you all.
Yeah.
And he scurries out. And I think that this is kind of the moment where it just showcases these are all of the things that can happen with your slander in your prints and your sensationalist news, and kind of highlights the dangers of all of that. And I'm sure that, with the way the story plays out, this is when William Randolph Hearst saw the film and was like, hey, now, I'm not a bad guy. I'm just printing newspapers. I've never hurt anybody in my life.
Right.
So I'm sure that's where that came into play. But yeah, I think I was enjoying the film for one reason up to the tragic turn of events, and then I was really enjoying it for another separate reason after that point.
Yeah.
I think the end of this movie is incredible.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I really like this overall, but the final couple sequences of this are incredible. One thing I want to highlight is specifically the line that Jenny has. The line that Jenny has right before she almost pulls the trigger is, my mother killed a rat, and I can do the same thing too. And that's when her, let's go ahead and talk about this. I think they got married. Maybe that she saw her parents were there and they called it off, but I think they're married. Her husband steps in, Philip, and protects her. And I really like this scene because it almost kind of I laughed a little bit, and I think there's some intentionality to it. Let me explain myself. He holds her and he kind of looks around and he sees how, I'm going to say scared Hinchcliffe is, frightened and disturbed as Randall is, and just absolutely dead. His isotop, or isopod. Isopod is absolutely just the facial features. He's sweating, he's just absolutely dead. I was like, this man is he has soiled himself. But then Philip has this great monologue where he says, this is what you do. You go out and you're going to keep doing this, and you're going to dress down women, and you're going to scandalize these stories, and you're going to make up lies about people, and you're going to put the worst parts of themselves out in the street, and you're going to be surprised when people are upset about it, and nothing's going to change. And then he and his wife leave. His wife leaves, and then he turns around, and then he holds up a gun. And it's almost kind of mocking the 1930s gangster style.
Yeah.
Where he has the gun out and he's like, and if you do it again, I'll kill all of you. If you mention my wife's name again, I'll kill you all.
Keep my wife's name.
And then he throws the gun in the wastebasket and leaves. And that to me was almost he gave the perfect, in front of his wife, the perfect response. She's like, wow, what a man, what a gentleman.
Yeah.
And as soon as she leaves, he's like, by the way, don't forget, I'll kill you. And I was like, okay, there it is. Cool.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great, and I really did enjoy that a lot. And you mentioned how great Marion Marsh was in that. I mean, specifically Anthony Bushell as Philip Weeks. I think he did a pretty great job in that too.
He did.
So in a role that otherwise you'd kind of be written off as oh yeah, it was the daughter's husband, fiance, whoever. He really kind of solidifies himself as no, I'm a character in this movie too.
Yeah.
So I liked both of their performances in this sequence.
Agreed. I do like that. Another thing that feels like a direct takeaway from the stage play is every character has a purpose. There's no, like, Bad Girl had a lot of side characters that had like zingers here and there. Every single character in this, no matter how big or small, is there for a reason throughout the course of this movie. And I did enjoy that quite a bit. From this point, though, you do get the last couple of minutes and the finale of it all. And this is when Joseph Randall decides, that's it, I've had it, I'm done, I'm leaving the publication. And he has a huge argument with Hinchcliffe, thank you so much. I keep forgetting. Has a huge argument where he's like, look, I'm done, I'm out of here. We are ruining lives. We're not a legitimate paper. We're just slop. That's all we are. He has a great line where one of the other people working at the newspaper threatens him, and he's like, for 2 cents, I'd smash your face in. And Randall says, you'd do anything for 2 cents.
Yep.
Love it. It's so good. But ultimately, he has a moment with Miss Taylor just as he's going in to wash his hands one last time. Completely. I think that's a great moment, too, where he's constantly washing his hands because he's trying to get this feeling of guilt. Yeah, the blood on his hands, metaphorically, off. And he goes into the restroom one last time to wash his hands clean. And he says to Miss Taylor, hey, I need you to write me a letter of resignation because I'm done. I'm out of here. And she has a huge smile on her face because she doesn't like what the paper is doing as well. She's only there because she cares so much about Joseph Randall.
Yeah.
And he comes out and he answers the phone. And they give him a big news story. They're like, hey, this just happened, and two homicides, and a miscarriage, or all of these really juicy, quote unquote, details. And he's like, tell them I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm not printing your story. And tell them they can. What is it? He says, like, tell them they can put their story up there.
Yeah.
And does a front page and throws the phone through the glass door of his office, just cutting out the explicit, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's I love that scene, and I love his performance there. He kind of has like almost a hysteric response because he's like, "Oh, a murder, a suicide too? Wonderful! Let's put it in the front page."
Yeah.
And he's being very excitable about it before he ultimately does what you mentioned there. And then, of course, the final shot is of the newspaper, the Evening Gazette, on the side of the street, and some ink is spilled on it, and then you just see it shovel into the rest of the trash.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great moment. I do want to call back to a couple things. One specifically, Jenny, there's a moment where Philip is reading out the newspaper, and he's reading about this Voorhees case. And Michael and Jenny are dancing while Nancy is kind of listening to Philip talk about this.
Right.
And he's reading the newspaper aloud, not just the front page, but then like skips to page 5 and reads the rest of the story too. And he's reading it aloud. And just as soon as I was like, that's really annoying. Like, he shouldn't. Why is his character reading this out loud? Like, this feels kind of like a plot device. I don't really like it. As soon as I thought that, Jenny stops dancing and she's like, oh no, I'm marrying a man who reads the newspaper aloud. And I was like, great. Perfect line to add in there.
I love when they call out stuff
so
like
good.
that.
I was like, okay, that's great. I love that line. That's perfect. The one thing, or the other thing I want to mention is, I love this movie, and we're gonna talk about our ratings here in a minute. But I love this movie. The downside to me is how close it comes to front page, and that maybe it can't help that. Like it can't control how recently it comes out to something like the front page. But there are so many similarities. I talk about that opening sequence of the front page and how that feels like, okay, well, now 5-Star Final is doing a similar thing. There's a shot that we talked about early on with the front page where we see Adolphe Menjou walking past all of the printing presses.
Yeah.
There's a similar scene in this where we see Joe Randall walking past a couple of desks, and we like the camera kind of follows him beyond. And there are things that block his path to where we can't see him, but then like he pops up again. And that felt not like a ripoff, but like reminiscent of that scene.
Yeah.
And then the very end of this scene that you pointed out of him throwing the phone through, Hinchcliffe's door and the glass shattering. And that completely calling back to Adolphe Menjou slamming his hand on the desk to kind of cover up his curse at the end of the movie. There's a couple things that feel so like, hey, remember this? That it doesn't feel like a standalone product completely.
It's interesting.
To me specifically, and I'm not saying like, hey, that's why everyone should rate this movie this way. It's just that stopped me from loving it unabashedly. It was more like, oh man, we just kind of did this. And there's a couple things at play. We do this pod for a reason, and we cover these years pretty close together. So I had just seen the front page. If this was a couple months or a year or two separated from it, I probably wouldn't even think about it.
Sure.
But you see those things almost like mirrored, like next to each other. It's hard not to compare them. So there's some things like that stop me from 100% loving it. But dude, I really liked this. I just said it stopped me from loving it. I do love this.
I adore this movie. I liked it more than the front page, personally.
I don't think that's wrong.
I think that the front page does tread more into satire, or at least kind of making light and bullying the newspaper industry.
Yes.
In kind of like a silly, playful way. Whereas this is really kind of a cautionary tale of how dangerous this type of news can be. And I think that's a story that is so important in the modern lens as well.
Yes.
And I love all the characters. I want to briefly just mention some of the players that we skipped over. Georgie Stone, while his character isn't super important to the narrative, we're big Georgie Stone fans. He's been around since day one with The Rat and Seventh Heaven, and he just, the way he plays his characters, he's so Weasley, and I think he adds an element to the newspaper industry that needs to be recognized in this type of movie to add kind of a levity, but also everybody here kind of is a rat. Also, Aileen McMahon as Miss Taylor. This was her first on-screen performance. Something cool that I read about her, which is kind of a big thing that's been popping up in the news lately. I've seen a lot of interviews with Toni Collette, I saw one, and with Kristen Stewart talking about method acting. And they were both saying, like, method acting, that's BS, right? Like, that's not a real thing. Notice that anytime there's method acting, one, people are playing terrible characters, and it's kind of just an excuse for people to be, like, really awful on set.
Sure.
And you never see a woman doing method acting.
Right.
Women never go method. I thought it was really interesting that Aileen McMahon is one of the first successful practitioners of method acting on screen. She was in, like, the very first class that was diving into method acting. And I'm sure method has evolved a lot from its inception to now, but I thought her performance was great. I loved her character. She was one of my favorites at how sassy she was. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, and I think that really she's one of the most important female characters we've experienced in any of the movies we covered. So shout out to Miss Taylor. I loved her.
Yeah, she was great. And, honestly, shout out to, you said, was it Aileen McMahon?
I believe that's how
I'm going to follow you on that. So shout out to Aileen McMahon and also Ona Munson, the two female reporters that were presented in this, or at least like in the publication.
Yeah.
I liked their characters a lot because they weren't just like kind of fodder. They were very much like, I have my own opinions and like I am a person. And I love that this felt kind of like, even though there were a lot of the whole isopod, like, sexual assault allegations, like it did feel a lot like they are standalone, like genderless characters. They don't have to be like, the women of the publication.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. I really enjoyed both of them.
There's a great moment with Miss Taylor, too, where she meets with Randall, and he's kind of asking for her opinion on something. She's like, well, I don't get paid for my opinions. And he's like, but I'm asking for it.
Yep.
Like, I want your perspective. And I thought that was, as silly as it sounds, I thought that was very progressive.
Yes.
And it was very welcome to see that on screen. Yeah, overall, I was completely blown away by this movie. And it's definitely one I'll return to in the future.
For sure. I've already looked for physical media of how I can find this.
Did you see what was available?
I haven't found anything concrete yet to report on, but I'm still looking to find a couple things. This is one of them. I just watched this last night, so it's very fresh, but I would love to pick up the Blu-ray of this if it's available.
It
seems like it is because we were able to you were able to watch on the Criterion channel, and I was able to rent it from Prime Video.
Yes. There was a DVD put out by the Warner Brothers Archive Collection a while ago, but it hasn't had a Blu-ray or anything. So if you find it, cherish it, because this movie...
I was going to anyways.
Rules. Yeah.
I'll at least look for the DVD. Probably a good time for us to get into ratings.
Absolutely.
Yeah? So I think you should go first.
I gave this movie 4 stars, and I think that could go up I enjoyed the heck out of this one.
I would argue that it can go up because I'm at 4.5.
Ooh, nice.
I really, really liked this.
Yeah.
I had a great time with it. I do want to address, this does become pretty melodramatic at times. And we criticize that from Eastland, at least I did specifically. And the difference for me is that it felt like there was a moral compass and a narrative beat that was present, or at least there was a reason this was happening. With Eastland, it kind of felt like all these awful things were happening for no reason. And in this, it felt like there is a reason, there is a message behind this. And it was easier to follow, more present. So I think melodrama can be completely fine. I think that melodrama was the reason that Eastland wasn't as engaging for me, because it just felt like this is melodrama, the movie.
Sure.
was my perspective. But I wanted to address that there are definitely moments of melodrama in my 5-star final. But I think ultimately what it lends itself to is the satire of these publications, and maybe less satire and just more like complete damnation of it.
Sure.
And not just publications in general, but specifically the New York Evening Graphic and those publications of yellow journalism that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I loved this.
I loved it too. I thought that it having something to say was very cool in a time when, All Quiet on the Western Front has been the most, hey, I've got something to say movie that we've covered. This was very, very kind of like a breath of fresh air, even if that breath of fresh air was a isopod gasp, if you will. But it was also cool to see Edward G. Robinson in a role that I really enjoyed him in. I like his gangster roles in Little Caesar and Smart Money, but I'm definitely more of a James Cagney fan. So I think he fit into this perfectly in a way that I didn't quite catch on with his gangster films. And it's cool to see Boris Karloff in a pre-Frankenstein role.
Yeah.
This same year is when he would debut as Frankenstein, and his entire career would shift. But, that's Boris Karloff.
He's so good. I really, really liked him in this. I think I also maybe shouted a little bit when he first showed up, because it says Boris Karloff in the beginning, and you're like, oh, cool, yeah, Frankenstein. No way, or Frankenstein's monster. And then when he shows up, maybe it's because his introduction quite literally is him walking into the office.
Yeah.
But I just heard like the It Follows score. And my first thought when he walked in, I was like, ah!
Yeah.
Run!
Pitchforks and torches.
He's great in this movie, though. I especially love literally, I think his first line in the movie is good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. I like to, after the moment with Jenny and the gun, and he says something like, I'm all perspiration. And
he's like, I'm perspiring.
Yeah, and Randall's like, well, perspire outside. It's so good.
It is great.
Double features.
I'm really happy with my double feature.
Okay, I'm lukewarm, so I'm going to go first, if that's okay.
That's completely fine.
I went with Gone Girl, which you have used as a double feature before, I believe for Alibi.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So I chose that here because I think that movie deals a lot with skewing the news to kind of for an ultimate goal or purpose.
Sure.
And that's the one similarity here, I think. And that movie gets pretty dark as well.
It does.
So not my best double feature, but I think you'd have fun with it.
No, honestly, I was just about to ask you if you had a tough time picking a double feature for this.
I did.
I did too.
Yeah. For some reason, 3:10 to Yuma kept coming into my mind. And
Interesting.
I haven't been able to determine why. So I'll be thinking about that, and I'll write a thesis on it later.
There's a couple. I look forward to it. There's a couple things that popped into my head, and I'll tell you the one thing. I don't know if it's just, the whole thing where you're like, okay, I'm driving, don't focus on the pole. Like when you're learning to ride a bike, you're like, don't focus on that tree. And then you end up running into the tree because you've been focusing on it.
Yeah.
Like you telling me like, hey, we probably don't want to do best picture nominees as double features because that gets confusing on the Letterboxd. I feel like every time I think now, I'm like, okay, what about this? Double feature or best picture nominee. Or I've done it before. September 5 is another.
Yeah.
I think I paired that with Front Page, but like that's another example of something like this. So I was like, well, I've already done this. I can't do that. And then I landed on what I think is probably the jackpot on this, and that is the 2014 Dan Gilroy movie Nightcrawler.
Oh, okay.
Nightcrawler is exactly what this movie is portending of what these publications can be. The idea of a journalist, or in this case, a videographer who chases ambulances, that looks for these accidents and looks for any kind of salacious case and just doesn't stop filming. And the moment that clicked on this for me was Kitty and the photographer sneaking into the apartment and finding, to their shock, these bodies. And while calling 911, don't stop filming.
Yeah.
And in Nightcrawler, there's a little more hesitation of like when to call 911, but to continue filming. And I think that desperation of, they don't do it just for themselves, but like they can make money on this. And this is what their career is. I thought that lent itself perfectly to something like 5-Star Final.
You do anything for 2 cents.
And 5-Star Final has a little bit more of a heart and a moral compass than something like Nightcrawler does.
Sure.
But I thought that the seedy nature of yellow journalism like this lent itself to something like Dan Gilroy's Nightcrawler.
Nice. I like it.
Another movie I enjoy a lot.
Another movie I haven't seen.
You haven't?
No.
I think you will enjoy it because it feels like Drive, but if everything sucked.
Wow. Things are pretty rough in Drive too.
Here's how I put it: Drive, but the vibes are bad. Like,
I feel like the vibes are pretty rough in Drive too, but I hear you.
Yeah.
I get you. Yeah. There's no real hero in.
No real human being.
Yeah.
And a real hero.
Song. I love that song so much.
I remember watching that in the theater and just kind of like, that was like when you see lightning strike. When you're looking around, you're like, did anybody else see this?
Yeah.
Like, I was watching Drive and I was looking around. I was like, we're all watching this, right? Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
It's so good. Isn't it also neat? Because this comes out just after Project Hail Mary has been out for a couple weeks. Isn't it neat that Ryan Gosling continues to be in movies where it's like, that's a really cool article of clothing, Ryan Gosling.
Yeah. He does do that quite a bit, doesn't he?
He wears jackets and sweaters where everyone's just like, well, I guess I'll be picking that up.
It's wool. You remember that?
Yeah. It's wool.
It's wool. I love that. But yeah, that's 5-Star Final. Those are our double features. So before we finish up with our little chit chat, we are going to cut over to a fantastic interview we got to do with Kim Luperi, who is a co-author of the book Pre-Code Essentials, Must-See Cinema from Hollywood's Untamed Era, 1930 to 1934.
That's right. We were able to get an interview with Kim and also Danny. They were very gracious with their time to be able to speak with us on 2 separate movies, and we won't spoil the other one just yet, but Kim was able to join us to talk about 5-Star Final, and I'm really excited to share that interview with you guys.
Yeah, so without further ado, here is our interview with Kim.
Kyle was showing me like the book and everything, and like the work that you're doing is incredible. So we appreciate you hopping on to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. And I rewatched this movie because it had been I loved this movie, but it had been a little while, so I'm like, I should watch it again. And then I was really depressed again after watching it.
It's a very depressing movie.
That's definitely the vibe that we feel watching these.
Yeah.
So what's kind of your history, your background here with film in general?
With film in general, I mean, I've liked classic films since I was a teenager. I think my grandma was somebody who got me into it, but then Pre-Code specifically, I somehow fell into. I think probably Mark Vieira's Sin and Soft Focus. Have you guys read that?
I have
heard of it.
No.
Okay. He had a new book that came out, Forbidden Hollywood, a few years ago, and it's pretty much Sin and Soft Focus, but updated and a little different, but like very similar. So that just like got me into it, and I wrote my thesis on Babyface because that was when like the uncensored version was found, and nobody had really talked about it yet, and that kind of led me into archival research and like led me to the libraries and archives and that I'm obsessed with. And then I, found other obsessive people on Twitter back in the day, like Danny. So kind of like all from there,
nice.
Snowballed.
Very cool. And I mean, I just picked up your book, and I'm only like a quarter of the way through, but I'm having a blast, especially the movies that we've already covered on the podcast. Like little details and things have popped up, like the divorcee. There was so much information that I didn't have when we recorded our episode. When did this kind of start, the book concept?
It started a really long time ago, and it was Danny's idea.
Mm.
So I've known Danny for a while, again, online mostly, and he came to me, I think, 2016, so literally 10 years ago, had an idea to do something like this because it had never been done. Luckily, in the last 10 years, nobody else did it, so we were still the first people to do, a book like this, kind of an essential film by film book. And yeah, I mean, we had wrote some of it like back and forth.
Hmm.
But then other pre-code books came out, like Forbidden Hollywood, which I just mentioned, I think came out in like 2018, 2019. So it's like, we can't have too many pre-code books out. Like, what publisher would want to do that?
Mm.
Luckily, our publisher, Running Press, does want to do that. So they did Forbidden Hollywood. They did a pre-code cocktail book also the last few
Oh, wow.
years. And then they did our book. So it's obviously a popular period, which Danny and I knew very well. But really happy that they, and we had been talking to them for several years on and off anyway. I met our editor in 2019. So she has always been a champion of us and this idea, and just very grateful that they, wanted to take a chance on it like 2 years ago. And yeah, and I'm thrilled because they were my dream publisher because they do the TCM books, and it's like, if I could have a book in the TCM library, that's the dream. So
Yeah.
I'm just still kind of in awe of it all, really.
And here you are.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Cool.
When I sent you the list of movies that we'd be covering on the podcast, you of course chose Five Star Final. Why'd you pick that one amongst the group?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think I talked to, so I forwarded the message to Danny, and Bad Girl was one that I really love. And then Danny said Bad Girl, and I was like, okay, all right. I won't say Bad Girl then. But Five Star Final would have been the second one, which is,
Mm.
I don't know. It's just Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers pre-codes, how fast and how gritty they are. Even fast, this is 90 minutes,
Yeah.
which for me, when I see a 90-minute pre-code, I'm like, oh boy. But it doesn't feel like 90 minutes, which is rare.
It does not.
It does not. It does not. And I hate long movies. Literally 65, 70 minutes. Perfect.
Right,
Bring
yeah.
back under 75-minute movies, please. So even 90 minutes, which is like, by today's standards, like very short. I was like, oh man, it's 90 minutes. It's so long. But it's so fast. It's just, yeah, it's like the dialogue is flying. Edward G. Robinson, I mean, is always a treat. And Aileen McMahon is one of my favorites of the period. She's got a small role in this, but anything with her, I'll watch. So I just remember loving it, and loving it in like a, yeah, I guess hate myself way sometimes because putting myself through like that movie because it's so disturbing and so raw. And just, yeah, watching it yesterday again, I'm like, oh my gosh, and how relatable and relevant it is. Again, these films, watching them almost 100 years later, and you're like, yeah, yeah, we're very similar.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
still there. It's
Different
crazy.
medium, but
Something I want to ask you about Five Star Final, we'll get to the pre-code era of it too, but I think there's a little bit of satire. We talked about this on the episode, that there's some satire in the way that they depict publications, specifically Edward G. Robinson's character. He's known for gangster roles, right? In Scarface. Did you read into the intentionality of putting someone like Edward G. Robinson in that role in Five Star Final, and like what they were kind of leading into with that?
I did not. But I mean, yeah, he's well known for, I mean, he was Little Caesar. I get him sometimes in my brain. I get like Little Caesar and Public Enemy, like wires crossed.
I'm right there with Scarface too, so I understand.
Yeah, so I'll throw them all in there. No, but I mean, it's a similar role, but without weapons. And I read that when I was, I was doing like a little quick research yesterday on the film because I haven't really written about this. It's not in our book. We actually don't have any like newspaper movies in our book. And I mean, you have this in the front page, two of the really big ones. But I did read that he had said this was one of his favorite roles. And, he didn't have to pick up a weapon. And I was reading somebody else, and I don't remember where to give credit, but they were like, no, he did, he has a weapon in this film. It's just not a gun.
Yeah.
It's just kind of himself and everything that he stands for and doesn't stand for sometimes. But yeah, I didn't read, back to your original question, I didn't really read much into that, but it's a similar role in ways.
It is, and that's what I thought was really interesting was the way they kind of portrayed his character in the sense of like you're right, he doesn't have a weapon, but he's the power of press, and like how does he use that? And the answer is in a very similar way. In terms of pre-code, were there any like standout features of 5-Star Final that stood out to you of like leading the path towards something like the code, like how you could tell it was pre-code?
Yeah, and so one thing I did do yesterday was I looked at the production code file. And the production code file for this is actually online and it's available to anybody who wants to see it, which I think is one of the really cool things about the production code files. Not all of them are online, but some of them are digitized. This is one of them. So if anybody wants to go to the Margaret Herrick Library's website, which is the Academy, they have in their digital collections the digitized production code files, and this is one of them. So I was looking at it. It's only 30 pages, which is short for a PCA file, but they were very worried at the beginning because this was an attack on journalism.
Right.
And so I'll call it the Studio Relations Committee, which is they were the go-between for the censors, the local censor boards and the studios. They were very worried about that, about this attack on journalism. They were very, very worried about Boris Karloff's character, who is impersonating a minister, and he actually got kicked out of divinity school is what they call it, and he's an alcoholic and he definitely molests women. They were very worried about that because they're like, that'll offend church people and religious people. But interestingly, those two things weren't as big of an issue like when it went to local censor boards. I guess they did get a lot of complaints from newspapers, even though this was supposed to be tabloids, but they're like in small towns, people don't know the difference between tabloids and newspapers. They just think it is an attack on, they just know newspapers. So they did get a lot of feedback, I guess, negative feedback from newspapers. And there were a few lines that really came under the censor board's wrath. One of them having to do with the Boris Karloff character. There's an exchange where this young woman reporter goes out on assignment with him and comes back and she tells Edward G. Robinson, she's like, please don't pair me with him again. Like, and he's like, why? And she's like, we were in, a taxi together and I don't have any skin left on my knees. And he's like, but what were you doing? Kneeling in prayer? And she's like, he was kneeling and I almost went out the side of the car. Which I'm like, not 100% sure, like what all of that means. Like him kneeling, I'm like, I don't know. But you obviously know that it is like he's touching her and yeah. That was something that was cut out a lot because it is pretty blatant that he is, doing things that you're not supposed to do to women.
Right.
And then the last line, I think it is the last line in the movie where Edward G. Robinson is, the opposite of quiet quitting when he's basically like on the phone and just at the end, he ends it with, and he's not even talking to the publisher, but he's talking to somebody else who I guess is like feeding him a story or something or telling them about a story. And he's like, tell the publisher to shove it up his, and then he throws, the phone or something through like the door.
Yeah.
That shove it up his very much countries and cities were like, nope, take that out. Just that expression. So it's funny because it would have just ended on just like, what? I don't even know what that would have ended on in that case. But those are some of the things that came out just to make everybody aware. And those are things that I definitely clocked before because I watched it before looking at the file and I'm like, yep, this is going to be something. This is going to be something. So it is fun to kind of play the game of like, what did they take out and kind of guessing game.
Right.
And so those were some of the things that you can tell. Anything that like looks like it's going to include profanity, even though it doesn't include, like son of a lank.
Yeah.
That stuff always came out. So, things like that I definitely clocked. And there's a lot more too, and maybe things weren't, heard by censors because it's so fast. The talking.
Yeah.
There's those are all great examples of like the things that the code is looking for. A question that I had for you was, this is one of the first times I can remember we're covering everything from 1927 to today. There's the lead in for the pod. And we're currently on the 5th year of the Academy Award nominations. And up until this point, I think this is one of the first times, it may be the first, but one of the first times where we've seen a movie tackle the concept of taking your own life. that ultimately ends in this movie, right? Was that something that the censors were looking at as well? Was that something that offended them?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So when you look in the files, they always have reactions to scripts or treatments, whatever the studio relations committee was given, and so that was something they always kind of would say, oh, we think this is probably okay by the code, or it is okay, or it's not okay. But then even if they said we think it's going to be okay, they're like, here are some things to look out for, and it could be a laundry list of things. And in this case, definitely the double suicide was something that I don't like. I don't know how you guys deal with spoilers, but like that is obviously a
No, yeah.
spoiler. I
Yeah,
mean, spoiler for like a 100-year-old movie, but
we'll allow it.
yeah, yeah, that was something that they were warned about, and they thought, and I haven't seen the original script for it, so it might have been different in the original script. They thought it was too gruesome. And I mean, they take pills or poison, whatever. It's something in a bottle that they take, and they thought it was too gruesome at first. So I don't know if it was cut because you do see it in silhouette. It might have been more prominent than that. You don't even see a bottle. They did warn about a bottle. So they were very, showing how to do things, especially crime, but maybe in this case, suicide, it's a depression. I mean, you don't really want to encourage stuff like that when so many people are already down
Right.
and dealing with so much. So that might have also been something going through their minds that they don't want to show the methods, the methods of doing some of these things. But that was definitely something that they said to take care with. When it went to local censor boards, there wasn't anything that I saw, at least in these files. They're not complete, but I didn't see anything about censor boards like removing that because that would have been a real hole
Yeah.
if you did. Although
Right.
they didn't really care, I think. They just were like, oh, deal with it, figure it out. So, yeah, but that was definitely something that was of concern. And yeah, seeing it in this movie, I mean, that's one of the reasons that this film is so jarring and very powerful, just because like that scene with HB Warner after he discovers the body and then when he has to confront his daughter who's like super joyous, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's such an incredible scene for him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's so sad.
it's definitely
Yeah.
one of those scenes where we go back and we watch these movies, and you kind of expect very limited storytelling, and then something jaw dropping like that will happen, and you're shocked. You're like, I didn't know this could happen during this time period. I always think it's interesting. 1930 to 34 is considered the pre-code era, and even with the podcast itself, we notice more of these kind of risque and taboo topics coming into play during this era when the production code was first introduced. Why was it more? Why did it happen more in films now than it did in like the late 20s? It, I've never understood that.
Yeah. I think it's probably hard to explain for some people pre-code era is, I mean, the dates at least starting are fluid a little bit. I've seen 27, I've seen 29, I've seen 30. Obviously the July summertime 1934 is a very hard date, right? Because it's the enforcement of the code. But we use March 1930 in the book at least because that's when the production code was adopted. Ignored, but adopted.
Right.
And so some people use 27 because that was when sound, came in, and then others I think use 29 because that's when sound was largely adopted. But it is, different people use different dates, and I think maybe you don't see it as much in the late 20s is because they were just getting used to sound. I mean, sound was a big part of it because now, you could hear a lot of these things. You can still show stuff and things can be pre-code, just visually only. But a lot of it really is the dialogue. And so maybe because they were still getting the hang of sound and getting used to it, maybe that was a reason that you don't see as much. And there are definitely movies in the late 20s where you do see themes. And even before that, themes that people, at least today, like modern, audiences would be like, whoa, I didn't know movies did that back then. So yeah, but that's an interesting question because I don't really know why that would be, except my assumption about sound.
I often wonder if it's one of those things where limitation led to innovation, kind of. So there were certain things that they were like, oh, we can't show this due to the production code. So you got more of a desire to like pepper those things in really unique ways. And that's an assumption on my part as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, and you definitely see that post. I mean, you definitely see that post code enforcement, especially with comedies. You see them trying to get around the code, and they really, could not do things in those days, certain things. So you see them trying to get around the code in ways that are very clever. And you're like, huh, for a second, you're like, was the code a good thing? And then you're like, no, it wasn't. But yeah, I mean, the thing about the code in 1930, and I remember reading about this with the divorcee, because the divorcee came out, I think March or April 1930, and the code was March 1930, so it was like right at that time. And they talk about there being a code, but divorcee is like, nah,
Yeah.
we don't, and the code was, adopted by the industry. They had a say in it. They were very well aware of it and worked on it, and so it's just kind of more that they adopted it just to get, because people were on their back and the government was on their back for so long about federal censorship. So it's like, we got to look like we're doing something, even though they were just ignoring it right off the bat. So I think in some cases the studios were trying to, maybe not do things that they weren't supposed to do, maybe not do things that the code said not to do. But in other cases, you see them blatantly trying to push things, and they would keep pushing too. They would, the studio relations committee would be like, take that out. And they'd be like, no. And so, yeah, so I don't even know if they were aware of it, of course. But I think in a lot of cases, they were just like, oh, we're just going to do what we want anyway.
That's really interesting to hear, because, a question that we were asking ourselves is the previous year that we talked about, the fourth annual Academy Awards, we talked about The Front Page, which is a really similar movie to Five Star Final. And for The Front Page, we would see some scenarios where they made adjustments for that code. And then specifically in the beginning, they would say, like, this film takes place in a is it fantastical land?
Yeah, like a mythical
land.
Or
Thank
something
you.
Like that.
Takes place in a mythical land to kind of like, advert the idea that this is Chicago or a specific location. In Five Star Final, we see much more of like a brazen tone of like, nope, this is specifically after this one publication. Very, very much trying to avoid that. Was this seen as like kind of like I don't want to say the word brazen, but like, more of a courageous attempt of like not meeting those standards?
Yeah, I don't know. And I wish we had more intel on that. And I'm sure some people have written about it, specifically maybe memoirs or autobiographies or biographies have written about that, from people. I know there's some I don't know if it's biography or autobiography of some people who were, Jack Vizard was one of them who, I think he was a production code administration. He was around a little bit later, but I don't think necessarily. And I think sometimes it also came down to if they were really told something was going to be a huge problem and they had to change it because, the studios wanted to do what they wanted to do. But ultimately, if a film went out to New York, for example, and New York was like, yeah, we're banning this film, then it's like, okay, now we got to play by the rules because that's affecting the bottom line. So they can't, if a film's going to be banned somewhere, something that's really, really big, then they have to change it. So I wonder if it came down just maybe in the notes. And Front Page is another file that's available. I don't know if it's digitized or not, but I think I have seen it. So there might have been a note that they got that, they said like, this is going to be a real problem. Because sometimes when things they said were going to be a real problem, they did adjust stuff. And I even see that in Five Star Final in the file. There was, again, kind of a laundry list of things to look out for. Some of it I recognize because it's still in the movie, and some of it I don't recognize because it was taken out. So they did remove things, and I don't know, again, in the studio's mind, if they're picking and choosing battles.
Right.
I'm not sure why certain changes were made. And it's interesting that you note that in the Front Page, that it was kind of a fantastical land. I haven't seen that movie in a little while, so I did not remember that. But Five Star Final, there were notes not to mention real newspapers.
Right.
So I think they had mentioned in the original script Chicago Daily Tribune, for instance, and they mentioned real people's names. Peggy Joyce Hopkins was a name, and that's a big name in the 30s. She was like, I forget who she, a socialite maybe. She was in International House, I think. But that name, they're like, take that name out. So, and they did. I don't think her name is in there. And I think Chicago Daily Tribune is not in there. I think it's, fictional newspapers, even though this is, well, this is it New York this film's set in? Right? I don't know. Did they say?
I don't
Actually,
remember.
I have the name of the publication.
Yeah, because now I'm thinking, but I know that they were careful about they had to be careful about offending certain things directly, offending papers, offending countries directly. So they try to take stuff like that out.
So it was called the Evening Gazette, but it was based on the New York Evening Graphic.
Okay, and was that because I know the playwright worked at a paper. Do you know if that was the paper he worked at?
I'm not 100% sure that it
Okay.
was.
Okay, because I remember reading that the playwright kind of, I'm not going to say had a similar role to Edward G. Robinson, but worked at a paper similar to this, I guess, and had bad experiences and quit. And then this was kind of his answer to, not his answer, but his feelings about working there.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I know Ben Hecht also worked as a journalist as a while, eventually at some point as well. And then we even talked about William Randolph Hearst and like his issues with the movie as well. And I don't know if if his power and position influenced anything with the code as well, or if he reached out to them and was like, hey, specifically, I don't want to look bad either. I don't know if there's documentation for that.
oh yeah. I mean, I know there's documentation in this file about Hearst, and it was, I think, what was it? I have some notes here. Was it Boston? There was one city where, not Hearst himself. Yeah, Boston. The mayor of Boston banned, I guess, some screenings of this at the insistence of Hearst papers.
Gotcha.
So not Hearst himself for that one, but I mean, Hearst was super powerful. So yeah, I'm sure. Oh, I don't know. I don't know it. I'm sure he could have voiced displeasure at certain things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know he was involved. This is a film in the book, Gabriel Over the White House. He was involved in that movie. But and anything with Marion Davies, he was probably involved in. But yeah, I'm not sure. That's an interesting question.
A question that I had for you, you had mentioned at the top that you were really interested in the idea of covering Bad Girl. Is that a movie that you love the idea of covering because of the troubled nature in getting it like actually made into a film, or was that like the movie itself?
Oh, I think it's both. I mean, I like that movie a lot. And the censorship history I remember reading about pretty recently. And there's just some great quotes. So certain files that I see that, and this file had some good quotes too, but certain files that I see that have fun, ridiculous quotes, I'm always drawn to, and that was definitely one of them. When they were just terrified of that book. Right, it was a book, yeah. They were terrified of that book, and then they said the movie made her a good little wife, among other things. So I was like, oh, this is going to be good. But yeah, no, I really like that movie, and now I'm completely blanking on the actress. What's her name? Like
It was Sally Ellers.
Sally. Yes, that's who it was.
Sorry, I was thinking of Norma.
Yes, yes. Gosh, and I like her. That's the sad part of this. I like her a lot. She's definitely not remembered today. But yeah, that movie and definitely some of the pre-code elements of it as well. And she's fantastic in it. Like, yeah,
Yeah, she
that
was great.
And it's not a film that, like the list that you sent, obviously some of these films are really huge films like Shanghai Express and
Right.
Grand Hotel, right? They're huge films and pretty well remembered, at least in the classic movie world, not in the world itself today. But that one is not, and it's a definite pre-code. And same thing with Five Star Final too. It's not as well remembered. I forget about it a lot of the time. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't know it was nominated for Best Picture. I had no idea.
Yeah,
No idea.
I mean, this is the first time we're seeing a lot of these movies ourselves. So I don't think we have a lot of like preconceived ideas on the movies. So we're really going to them saying, oh, this is a Best Picture nominee, and then discovering the reverse of everything you probably know about the movies.
That's cool though. That's very cool. And I mean, it's a very interesting subject for a podcast too. I really like it. Because
Appreciate
yeah, a
that.
lot of times, especially if, if you're not a scholar of this period and you don't know these films before that, and you're just kind of going through start to finish, and you're like, what makes this Best Picture nominee? It's definitely yeah. It's like very a clean, kind of clean slate to like look at all these films
Yeah. One
and
of my
judge them.
favorite things about it is it serves as kind of like a jumping off point to discover a lot of different types of film. And specifically with the time period that we're sitting in, it just discovering your book and all of the films so far that have been listed, I read about them and I'm like, oh, I really want to watch that one. I want to catch this one. I just watched Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde last night for the first time, and that's been a blast. And reading all of the information here as well about that film, it's just like it's so cool to see like very specific pockets of different types of film.
Oh yeah. And that was, I mean, it's interesting because the Oscars were so different back then, obviously, because they were babies, they were brand new. But I remember doing a podcast recently about the Oscars, and I was doing some research into the first few years that, that you've covered some of them. I was looking at the pre-code period, so you've covered some of these already, and you haven't covered some like 32, 33. But just it was just wild, just with the nominations, like how many films were nominated for Best Picture, how many films were nominated for actor, sometimes, or films, actors nominated. Sometimes it was three, and sometimes they had two films.
Yeah.
It was just like everything was so in flux because they were still figuring stuff out, and then there were categories that aren't there anymore. But it was really interesting, and especially the dates too, because the list that you gave me, some of those films were 1931 releases, some of them are 32 releases.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to go back and you're like, wait, what were the dates of these, what was up for, because they always have like the start and end dates, and
Yeah.
that's why it straddled the years, and that's why it kind of gets confusing sometimes. You're like, wait, this is a 1931 movie, but they're doing this in 1933. Like,
It's
what's
the
going
most
on?
frustrating part of these early years for us because we're like, we're covering the movies of 1931 and a half to 1930. It's so bizarre.
That is exactly why I've been saying the fourth and fifth Academy Award, because specifically I have been losing my mind on like what year we're actually in. We're talking about 1933, but they're movies from 31 and 32.
Yeah, and yeah. When I looked at this list, I was like, what?
Yeah, it did not. It's very it shakes my confidence daily. Is what I've been using on that.
So you mentioned Bad Girl was adapted from the book, and then Five Star Final was a stage play as well. Do you happen to know? I find it so interesting that they take these really progressive and these source materials that have so many taboo topics, and then they adapt them to the screen, which is being so strictly enforced by this production code. Once the Hays Code really comes into effect in 34, does Hollywood kind of start looking more at its source material and just saying, no, that book is too much, or that play is too much. Let's just not even think about it.
I definitely think so, but that had been going on all along too. It was just the fact that, during the pre-code years, there was a code, they were just ignoring it, and it was not enforced, right? So you see that with Mae West. Mae West terrified censors on the New York stage, Hollywood, everywhere she went, really, of course. And for her, some of her plays, Diamond Lil, which was She Done 'Em Wrong, that was on a list. Like they actually had like lists of plays or maybe novels too that were just banned for adaptation. And I know Mae West was on there. And the funny thing, just quick story about She Done 'Em Wrong, because the funny thing about that is they wanted to do her play Diamond Lil, and they're like, you can't do that. That's on the ban list. And so they, submitted under another name, and they're like, this is Diamond Lil, guys. You can't do that. They were like trying to like get it through.
Yeah.
They're like, this is the same thing. You just gave it another name. And they eventually got through, and then other studios were like, what the heck? Like, that is based on a play that you said we couldn't do, right? And so this is pre-code period. This is like, not enforced, right? This is why they could get away with it. And so there were definite plays and books that they were like, yeah, you can't do this. And you see that with Bad Girl, where they were like, oh, we're really scared of this source material. And a lot of times you do see that they're like, this is based on something which is very bad. Um, and they would normally say, like, you have to find a way to soften it up or to make it, acceptable. And so I'm sure post-code enforcement, I just haven't done as much research, but I'm sure it's very similar where they did have more of a backbone at that point to say no.
Hmm.
So I'm guessing that they either did sometimes or maybe did the same thing where they were like, oh, this is, very suspect material. Like if you can tone it down, okay. If you can't, then you can't. Because you also see that with films that studios were trying to re-release after code enforcement, because after code enforcement, they had to go through the code. And so a lot of films, pre-code films, would go through the code and they were like, no, this is no amount of cutting is going to save this movie. Back to the vault. And so I am sure that similar things happen with books. If books were too outrageous, they were probably like, no, don't even touch it.
Right.
For this one, yes, this one, the very, very first page of this production code file is a review of the play. And the play came out, I think, December 1930. The movie came out September 1931, 9 months later. So fast.
Yeah.
And that's not even the fastest I've seen. But they had a review of the play, and the person was giving a very detailed review of the play because they said they believed it had grave worries. They said from an entertainment standpoint, it's great. They agree with every word of it. It's exciting, but they think it's going to be worrisome per the code. So they did definitely, when they saw things like that, when the Studio Relations Committee saw stuff like that or sensed it coming, they definitely voiced that opinion. And then they hoped they would clean it up. But it didn't even matter anyway at the end.
Right.
Obviously, the book that you and Danny wrote, Pre-Code Essentials, talks a lot about this. So we appreciate you being able to doing the work in a lot of this. I know you talked about in the book, you talked a bit about Grand Hotel. So you're very well aware of like this year and the complications or at least the hurdles that these movies faced when trying to make production on this. So was there anything notable with Five Star Final in terms of like the production that stood out to you when you saw this list of movies?
Just like within them being Oscar nominated, or
Maybe in terms of the pre-code, like the difficulties they faced.
yeah. I mean, I was very when I saw it, yeah. So looking in terms of like pre-code stuff, Bad Girl was the one that stuck out to me. Five Star Final stuck out to me as just movies that probably had some issues. Grand Hotel is a movie that doesn't, it definitely had code issues, but it's not a movie that you really think of as pre-code. People think of it as pre-code, but not like the biggest example of pre-code, for instance.
Sure.
But yeah, Five Star Final was one just because of, Warner Brothers films like ripped stuff from the headlines. So there's always apt to be things that people are upset about because of that, because how timely it is and things like that. So I was kind of surprised that there wasn't more. When I looked at this file, it was 30 pages, and that is super short. They packed a lot into those 30 pages, though. Yeah. But yeah, I was, so nothing too surprising pre-code wise. I definitely knew that there were a lot of elements in there, and yeah. It's looking at it with a list of other movies, it's just so interesting because of the range that you have. I mean, you have musicals, right? You have this film, a newspaper drama. You have Shanghai Express, which is just a league of its own in a way. You have Bad Girl, Aerosmith. Gosh, I don't know much about Aerosmith, which is why I was like, I'm not doing that one because I don't. I've seen it a long time ago and I could not talk about that film right now. But just interesting to see the range.
Yeah.
There's a lot of range this year specifically.
Yeah.
And I asked why you had chosen Five Star Final. I know you were kind of reaching for Bad Girl, but just with you rewatching Five Star Final again recently, how do you think it holds up like to a modern audience and to you as well? Did you enjoy it as much as you did the first time or more?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely holds up. I feel like this is a movie that has themes that are super relevant still. And I mentioned that earlier. And that was something that we looked at in the book because one of the connections we were trying to make between pre-code era and today is how many of these themes are still just super topical. And this one, watching it, it was kind of unreal how much that stood out to me because even though this is about a newspaper, which newspapers are, I don't want to say dead, but like, definitely not as big at all in people's daily lives as they were in the 30s and back then. But just looking at it, I'm like, yeah, this is social media. This is the 24-hour news cycle that we have, just in a different medium. It, how people ruin lives, how these big, companies or entities ruin lives. You still see that today. So super, super timely. And that jumped out at me so much. I really enjoy, I don't know if I like want to use the word enjoy. I think it's a good movie. It's a really solid movie. It's so sad, but
Yeah.
there, and and thinking of the period, I'm like, this is one of the movies that really sticks out to me that I forget about because it's not as well remembered, I feel like. It's a movie that sticks out to me as being just like, wow, they they go there. They, between the suicides, Marion Marsh's speech when she goes to the newspaper
Yes.
and it's like, why did you kill? I'm gonna butcher that quote, but like, why did you kill my mother? I mean, she was 17 at the time,
Oh,
Marion
wow.
Marsh.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
She was really young during the pre-code period, which is kind of like when you see her in some of these movies, you're like, she's like underage. That, didn't matter back then to people. But she was 17 when she filmed this film. And just, I mean, so much of this is so, cynical, obviously, but it's just unfiltered and just so powerful. And that speech of hers was super powerful. And so I, I didn't remember how powerful it was and, some of those scenes and how really, yeah, blatant they are.
Yeah.
And so that kind of it shook me. Again, enjoy is like not the right, enjoy some of it, right? Like again, Aileen McMahon, love her, love seeing her, love Edward G. Robinson and seeing him, but just some of the scenes kind of shake you,
Yeah.
and they still do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought up Aileen McMahon. She's one of my favorite characters in this movie. I find that, especially during the pre-code era, I really enjoy the women on screen. I feel like they're written in a way that is very kind of like spiteful in a way, and I don't know, like they're very sharp witted and they say a lot of surprising things, and they tend to be one of the standouts of, oh wow, I thought women at the time were kind of being restricted more, which not to say they aren't, but just some of the lines that especially Eileen McMahon gets in this film. Like specifically when she's talking about the new hire for the street reporter and why she got the job and all of that.
That, yeah.
It's just fun to see stuff like that.
Yeah, and that was another scene that they said to watch out about.
Right, sure.
And that's in there. And that's in there. So the lines that I read in that file where they're like, take that out. No, that's in there. When she gets drunk, those lines, they said take that out. That's in there. Yeah, she definitely flies under the radar. Again, for classic film fans, they know her. But even for some classic film fans, I mean, she's not a Betty Davis, right? She's not a huge name. But just a plug for her, during this era, she did a lot of supporting roles like this. But if you haven't seen it yet, you have to watch Heat Lightning.
Heat lighting.
I introduced that 2 weeks ago in Santa Ana at the Frida Cinema, and it is one of my favorite pre-codes, one of the most unique pre-codes in my opinion, and she stars in it as a female auto mechanic.
Oh,
So,
nice. Okay.
yes, that's again, like how many times do you see a movie about a woman who owns an auto body
Yeah,
now or 100 years ago? So,
absolutely.
Was that in the 30s?
34.
34.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Nice.
pre-code. Yeah, it's pre-code, and it's just a different Warner Brothers as well. She was, guess she assumed she was under contract to Warner Brothers. Yeah, because she was in like Gold Diggers of 33 and all those things. But yeah, yeah, women, whether it's leads or supporting, yeah, they get roles that you might not expect them to, and lines that you might not expect them to during this period, which is definitely one of the things that makes it so fun
Yeah.
for me. And being a woman, just seeing some of the characterizations again, because they can astound today. And it's so cool to see that.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to praise the book one more time because I'm having a blast with it. And I think one of the things that I think deters a lot of people from kind of diving into classic film is they think it's going to be kind of stuffy, and the people that enjoy it might even be a little gatekeepy at times. And I've got to say that this book is written in a way that is very inclusive and inviting. And even some of the comedy that you guys add in this book, I've enjoyed quite a bit. Specifically, I want to point out one thing in Night Nurse, I think, where there is a photo of Barbara Stanwyck and Joan Blondell looking at a skeleton in a bed. And the caption just said, "That skeleton scared Barbara Stanwyck's and Joan Blondell's clothes off." And I think that like hint of humor really makes this book like just so easy to pick up and read as somebody that has any type of enjoyment from film. And I appreciate that so much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was definitely something we were going for. I mean, Danny and I have a sense of humor and writing. He more so. I love his writing, and some of the things that he wrote. He has a later in the book, he has a quote about Paw Patrol. And I know you know it's from him because it talks about being a parent, and I'm not a parent and he is. But I love that we were able to do that and have fun with it. I come from more of an academic writing background, so for me it's not a stretch. But I do on my Instagram account, I try to be like much more laid back and casual, and I do love writing that way. So that was something that we really wanted to do because, yeah, like you said, we wanted to include everybody, whether they were a really big fan of this period, whether they had never seen a film from this period. We wanted to make it accessible to everybody so that they would understand. And, humor is definitely a way to just make it more enjoyable, right?
Sure.
We didn't want to make it a dry read, and neither did our publisher. They definitely did not want to make it academic. They did push back a little bit on how many production code files we were able to include, which if it were up to me, I would include more because I love those and you don't get to see them. But I love just we have so many images too and so many great pictures like that one from Night Nurse that you just mentioned. It's Night Nurse. It's like how many pictures of them taking their clothes off, can you find? There's a lot of them. Can't include all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you. Roundabout way to say thank you because we were definitely trying to do that and very much wanted to just make it something open to everybody.
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it. So the mix of humor and all of the information is just put together in like my personal favorite format. So thank you again for that.
Yeah, but thanks again for reaching out. And this is just a really cool idea for a podcast.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, we appreciate
I've
that.
listened to one or two, but I'll have to listen to more because now I'm really interested.
Well, thank you. We do really appreciate that. Yeah, as far as what you have going on in the future, obviously this book came out just a few months ago. Is that right?
Yes, it came out October.
Okay.
End of October.
Nice.
It's been like Danny's published books before, more so like self-publishing or nothing of like this stature, like the publishing company of the stature. So, and for me, it's my first time, so I have no idea what I'm doing and no idea what to expect, basically. But it's been great so far. I mean, Danny and I did a mini book tour on the East Coast when it came out, just because there was an event in Silver Spring, Maryland at AFI there. They have a classic film weekend, and it was literally the weekend after the book came out. And
Oh,
they had a
perfect.
pre-code. Yeah, they had a pre-code fest the year before that I went to and presented at. And so, I mean, it was just perfect timing. And it wasn't a pre-code fest this year, but we reached out and, I was like, can I come back? And Danny's in Germany, so it was kind of a halfway point for us at that point. And then we were able to do things in New York at Film Forum, which is a theater I grew up going to, I was from Jersey, so I would go there with my mom and got to do stuff in New York and Pittsburgh and just random places that I was going to be or I knew we were going to be, and I would just contact theaters, and been doing stuff in LA too now. So I just did something in Santa Ana, did things at the American Cinematheque here in Los Angeles. We have some more things on the horizon. We're going to be at TCM Classic Film Festival in a few weeks.
Nice.
Wow.
Danny's coming in, so I'm excited to see him because I don't see him very often, of course, him being all the way across the world. So very excited for that. And yeah, hopefully we'll be doing some more things this year. So just kind of like, I don't know, seeing what we can do, and it's just fun. I just selfishly I like watching these films on the big screen with an audience. So whenever I get the chance or can pitch it, I'm like, let's do it because it's so much fun.
Yeah, we feel the same way. We're all about the preservation of film and being able to play these for wide audiences. So thank you for your work on that. So the book is Pre-Code Essentials. Where can everyone find that?
It is available anywhere books are sold, they say. So it's available online on Amazon, things like that. It's also available, independent bookshops like Larry Edmonds in Hollywood as well, and other local bookstores. So yeah,
Awesome.
anywhere really.
Well, thank you for your incredible work on that. We really appreciate you both you and Danny, hopping on the pod to be able to talk to us about these movies and for all the hard work and excellent work that you've done with the book. So congratulations on your success as well and having that publication out there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And where can people find you? I know you mentioned the Instagram briefly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. So Danny has a site, precode.com, pre-code.com, I'm pretty sure. And then I do like the Instagram handle of that. So it's precode.com, spelled out the dot. Yeah, I'm on Instagram there. Mostly that's the only Pre-Code social I have. I have other accounts, but that's the only Pre-Code one. And I post clips, random, fun, depressing clips on there from the period, and sometimes censorship stuff too, which is really fun. So yeah,
Awesome.
check me out there.
But yeah, thank you so much again for coming on the pod. And hopefully we'll get to see a screening that you host sometime in the future.
Yeah, no, thank you. Where are you located, by the way? Are you East Coast? Or?
Yeah, we're in Atlanta.
Atlanta. Ooh, Atlanta is a place that people have said I should go.
A lot of historic theaters.
The Plaza, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah, that I've had friends that are like, I know people in Atlanta who know theaters and they can get you in somewhere. And I would love to. I mean, I have a day job, so I would love to go anywhere. It's just a matter of getting there.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's the hardest
I know
part.
that feeling.
Well,
yeah, but Atlanta's definitely on the list.
We'll do whatever we can. Whenever you want to come out to Atlanta, let us know, and we'll whisper in some ears of the plaza to make sure we can make that happen.
Oh, awesome. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I would love to. I've never been to Atlanta, so I would love to go.
We're ready to have you.
Yeah. Very cool.
Cool. Well, thank you
All right.
again.
Yeah, thank you again.
Big thanks again to Kim Luperi, who was available to speak on 5-Star Final and just Pre-Code in general. I had a blast talking to her.
That was a lot of fun. And, the reason that we know as much as we do and we're able to speak on these things is that we have other people like Kim and Danny out there writing these books and publishing them for everyone to learn about. So, again, Pre-Code Essentials, as Kim said, anywhere the books are sold, make sure you go out and pick that up. We've really enjoyed our time with it so far and can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, and if you want to see more from Kim, you can go to precode.com, the website, but also precode.com, the Instagram page. And she's always posting clips from Pre-Code Hollywood films that are just a ton of fun. As she mentioned, some are funny, some are depressing.
Can't relate.
Yeah, well,
Can't relate at all to the depressing things that we talk about on this podcast.
Never. But big thanks again to Kim, and look forward to the episode we have coming up with Danny.
Absolutely.
If you have thoughts on this movie, which I'm sure you do, because it's fantastic.
Honestly,
So good.
for Kyle and I's benefit, please ask questions and have discussions about this movie in the Discord.
Yeah.
Because we'd love to keep talking about it.
Yeah, this is the first one this year, and probably the first one in a while that I'm like, guys, you should watch this. This is great.
Sure.
But if you do have anything you want to write in, shoot us an email at outaopodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to check out the Patreon, patreon.com/outaopodcast, for access to the annual poll where you choose what film you think deserves Best Picture, access to the Discord, watch parties, your movie reviews. There'll be more of those coming soon. And What else? What else? Rate and review the show. And I think that's it. What are we doing next?
The Champ.
The Champ, yes. The return of Wallace Berry. And I believe Jackie Cooper. Yeah.
He returns. The return of the king.
I think that's right.
Do we know if he's awake for this one?
Probably. I think Marie Dressler woke him up and was like, you got to go be in The Champ.
Time to star in The Champ.
Which is funny because she won for Min and Bill.
With Wallace Berry.
With Wallace Berry, yeah.
Well, look at that.
What a little circle we got going on.
Do we know if little Jackie Cooper was still crying by the time that The Champ was filming? Had the sedation worn in?
He hadn't written, please don't shoot my dog yet. So
I cannot believe that.
I know, it's wild. But that's going to do it for this episode. As always, I'm your host, Kyle.
I'm Ryan.
And we'll see you at the movies.